Well, welcome to the Impactus podcast. I'm Dean Brenton, and we are here to equip you as men for a life of purpose and godly impact. I'm so delighted to be sharing this podcast with a good friend of this ministry and a new friend of mine, Pastor Narte Hochstetler. And Nate, it's so good to have you as a part of this podcast today. Thank you for doing this.
Well, it's good to be here. It's first time for me, but I'm looking forward to it for sure.
Well, we are too. A little background that you provided for me, but you've been married now for 40 years, 6 kids, 9 grandkids. Congratulations. You were born and raised on a dairy farm in Indiana, but as of August, you've lived in a place called Sioux Lookout for 30 years, where you serve as a bi-vocational lead pastor, a coffee roaster, and a real estate agent, among other things. And to quote you, you said, I enjoy spending time with family, roasting and drinking specialty coffee. And that warms my heart, I must say, and cooking on your Traeger. I also mentor men in our church over coffee or making a dump run with them. And I've been extremely blessed in my life. God has been good, always there through the good times and the bad, as the song says. And we'll talk about some of that today. And so thank you, Nate, for joining us. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So tell us a little more about your backstory, your faith journey, and maybe even what led to you to be a pastor today in Sioux Lookout.
Well, as I said, I was born and raised in Indiana, born into a Christian family, Christian heritage. Like my grandfather was a leader in a church, and his grandfather as well. So I was born into a Christian community, and always, and my family was a very close family, actually. Like we spent lots of time together with my cousins, aunts and uncles, but a lot of things evolved and were done around church stuff. But having said that, I still had to, I went through my teen years, and I went to a Christian high school all my life, like grade 1 to grade 12, and so I had, Christian friends, family around me all the time. But still in high school, as typically happens, there's all kinds of things that want to take your attention away from the church and away from God. And that happened to me. I had a period of time for maybe a year and a half where I really wasn't serving God in a very intentional way at all. And all the time, though, remember, I was in a Christian school. I was in leadership in that school. I was leading things in my class and different things. And it wasn't until just the spring of my senior year when God really touched my heart in a new way, and really kind of arrested my thoughts. But it was interesting because at that time I thought, how would God ever want me to come back to him? Like, I've made all these mistakes. I haven't lived for him. Really, why would he want me? And it was through my wife. Now, we were dating at the time. And I remember so specifically her saying to me, but Nate, God loves you. Like, he cares about you. He'll take you back. Doesn't matter what you've done. He still wants you. And it was through her kind of helping me walk through that. Of course, she was walking with the Lord. She was doing the right stuff, but I wasn't technically in a sense. So it was through that I came back to God and really renewed my relationship and renewed my following after him in a very, specific more specific way. And then we got married. I mean, we were young when we got married. I was 20 when we got married. And then right away went into, God called us to do something that I said I would never do. And that was Christian education. Like I was born as a dairy farmer. I thought that's where God was going to take me to help work with my dad on the farm. But it was something quite different. And I said I'd never be confined to 4 walls inside doing something like that. And yet that was the journey that God had us on. And God, that was like I always tell people, I think the first call of God in my life was education, Christian education, and educating young people. And I've always been I'm a bit of an introvert, but I do like people, and I like to be around people, like being involved in relationships. And so that initial time that we spent in working in a Christian education led to, well, I think it's 35 years now. I'm no longer actively involved daily with that, but that was my first call. And that's kind of where my faith journey, I think, began to expand as I began to pour things into young people, and God blessing me with input, and then being able to share it with young people. That's kind of where, that's kind of the backstory of where I am today. That's how it all started. And that's how I found out about Sioux Lookout, because we came to Sioux Lookout in 1982 to 84 and spent time in a small Christian school, and then went back to the States and lived there for 7 years. And our church at the time was starting their own school. And so I helped get that started and worked there as a principal for a number of years. So, but that's kind of the backstory of where God called me into ministry, and God called me into what I'm doing today.
Oh, it's a fascinating story, and incredible to see how God, called you in a relationship with him, and then called you to serve him. And here you are today in Sioux Lookout. Now, tell us, first of all, for those that may not know, where is Sioux Lookout?
Well, Sioux Lookout, if you know where Thunder Bay is the closest big city. We're about 400 kilometers north of Thunder Bay, and we're just about 45 minutes off the Trans-Canada. So no one passes through Sioux Lookout unless they plan to. Like, you don't just go through, because there's nothing, like there's one town 275 kilometers north of us, but then that's the end of the road, basically. And so, but that's where Sioux Lookout is. We're about 3 hours to the Manitoba border. So we have 5 hours to Winnipeg, 4 hours to Thunder Bay.
Okay. That's helpful to know for sure, for some that are listening and asking, where is Sioux Lookout? And now we know. So You didn't come to Sioux Lookout, though, as a pastor. You came there as an educator, and then God started to do some things, and you stepped into a ministry role. So tell us about how that happened, and tell us about ministry in Sioux Lookout.
Yeah, I came originally in 1991 is when we moved to Sioux with my family, and we came initially for a 3-year term. And this is how it usually works, isn't it? But we came for 3 years and said, we'll do that, and then we'll see what God does. Well, then God said, no, stay. And our kids, we had 4 kids at the time, and in talking with them, they were young, but they were old enough to understand moving and leaving cousins and grandparents, and so they were a part of our decision as well, but felt God calling us to stay here in Sioux Lookout at that time. And so while I was involved, I was principal of the Christian school. At the same time, I then became the associate pastor of the church. And so that's how that lent itself into ministry in that way, because I was involved in the church anyway via the school, but then we were also then I became the associate pastor of the church, and I held that position until 2006, when our lead pastor then retired and moved away, and then I became the lead pastor of the church at that time, and so that was really, it was like you said, I didn't come here to be the pastor of a church. That was kind of the last thing I thought I would do. Really, I didn't think that was where. And it's interesting enough, I talk with some of my friends, guys who I grew up with, and several of us are pastors. And we said, let's go back to grade 7 and grade 8 when we were in school together. We'd have never thought we'd be pastors in our wildest dreams, and how God's leading and his grace, takes us places where we least expect. And so, that's one of the things I take away. I tell young people many times, there's nothing lost to God, no matter what it is or what you're doing. It's preparation for something else. Like that's been a common theme and a reoccurring theme in my life. And I see that in so many ways of that. Ministering in Sioux Lookout, it's a small town. So, the sign says 5,500 people, but that encompasses all the rural areas. So the town proper is only maybe 3,200, 35 maybe. So, and we have a large First Nations community in our town, and we minister to them. And so there's challenges involved with that. And we just, in this last year, all the things that have come out with with children dying in residential schools and all of those issues. We deal with those not daily, but sometimes weekly with people that come to our church. And so to portray the church as a place of safety and a place of grace, is a challenge when you're dealing with people who grew up in a residential school. They've come out of that. They've dealt with all kinds of really nasty things done to them. And so to show them God, to show them Jesus who loves them and cares for them, and the church being a suspect place, and to come across with saying, we're okay here and you're okay here. And this is a place, it's a safe place. It's a place where we learn about Jesus together, and we're not judging you. It's not a place of justice, but it's a place of grace. So that's a challenge. That really is. It's a challenge that I knew when I first moved here that I was going to have to deal with when it comes to leadership. And it is something we deal with quite frequently, for sure. But having said all of that, we live it's a beautiful community, like it is. And we have a lot of issues that we deal with in a community level, but as a church, very supportive, and just, it's a great place to do ministry.
Oh, thanks for the window into the real heart of the community and the heart you have for the community, because that is very real. And the church has such a wonderful opportunity to be that safe space, and we need to reclaim that. I think the church should be the safest place in the community, and sometimes that's not the view the world and our communities have of us. But it's beautiful to hear you talk about that. So I know you've been involved in the community on a number of fronts, because you haven't been only a pastor. You've also been involved in real estate and coffee roasting, which is of particular interest to me because I'm a bit of a coffee drinker. But tell us about that, but also how that's helped you probably be, even more engaged in the community.
Well, when I was, we talked earlier that I'm bi-vocational, and that happened as a result of our church. When I became lead pastor, and then a few years later, we transitioned away from the birthing mission organization that started the church. We just felt it was time to be on our own, and we're now a part of another church organization. But we have a small church, and as far as supporting a pastor full time, they're not able. I said, I'll get another job. I'm glad to be bi-vocational. I can do that, and so. That's when I got my real estate license, my broker license. And it's just interesting because it's like someone said, you're just, instead of selling Jesus, you're selling houses. And that's really what it is, because, I want my life to translate into my business just like it does at church, which is I live a life of integrity, honesty. And I was just last week, I was talking with a client about a house, and I was telling him some of the bad things about the house. And they kind of looked at me like, I thought you're trying to sell this house. And I said, I am, but I will always be honest with you. And I want you to understand that. So those opportunities. And then when, there's times people don't get houses they want, and there's disappointment. And I credit, the broker record I work with, the lady who comes as a part of our church. And she said, Nate, we can share God in ways that people don't even understand. Like, if you don't get a house, God must have a better one for you. And we can say that to people. And we don't preach them a sermon. We don't do any of that stuff, but we can, by our lives and by just those little words, we can encourage them and help them to understand it. I've many times, I've had people talk about their lives and their difficult things. And one time a guy was talking about his life and situation, his family, says, and he stopped me and says, why am I telling you this? Like, well, I'll listen. And I'll hear what you're saying, and then I'll offer advice, if you want me to do that. And so that it all just kind of dovetails. Like I like to see the breakdown of the idea of a sacred job at the church and a secular job. Like when you bring that together, like Romans says, our sacrifices are worship. Like the things we do are worship, and so and to walk into a business and people are glad to see you. Like, I think that's important as a believer, as a businessman in my community. I want that to come across, that, hey, I don't want people to run away when I walk in. I want to be the man they want to see, And so that's how I portray and how I look at business and pastoring together. Like, to me, it works, and it's a great way to minister to the community for sure.
Oh, it's really good. Tell us about the coffee roasting business as well.
Yeah, coffee roasting. I mean, I've as long as I can remember, I've wanted to roast coffee, and I've enjoyed coffee for many years. So, but it never worked. I thought I'd just have a little roast for myself and roast for my friends, But then a couple of years ago, we have a local Christian bookstore that they bought a new building, and a very large, good sized building, and so the lower level was just empty space they weren't using, and they were looking for like a commercial tenant for that space. So the guy who's managing that came to me and says, "Nate, what do you think? You like coffee, I like coffee. Should we start a coffee business?" And I said, "I'm in. Count me in. I think it's a great idea." So we that was back in 2015. And so we started doing research and of course went to talk with people and visited roasteries and put together a business plan and purchased a roaster. And so we do, it's a specialty coffee roast. Like, everything that we purchase is direct trade from farmers. So we work with just select companies. We don't work with just anyone that tries to sell us coffee. We have to know where the coffee comes from. It's sourced directly from the farmers, and mostly in Central America, some from Haiti and the Dominican Republic, but most of it comes from Central America. And so we started this business, and we started roasting coffee. And then about a year later, the bookstore opened up a coffee cafe. And so they obviously serve our coffee because we roast it in their building. And so that's kind of how the business has grown. We have one other coffee shop that uses our coffee. That's the only coffee they use. And so we're looking at expanding that. We're excited about a new website coming out probably next month. We've been working on it for quite a while now, but so that people can actually just access it, order coffee, we'll mail it out to them, those kind of things. So, and it's interesting to see like Sioux Lookout, like, it is a small town, but we have a lot of people coming here to work from the larger cities, Toronto, Winnipeg, and they're used to their corner coffee shops where they can pop in for a latte or whatever they want to buy, and they're really excited to see a coffee shop they can walk in and order whatever drink they're used to drinking, because we'll make it for them, and so they appreciate the specialty coffee, the direct trade, and our care of how we roast and why, and all the socioeconomic reasons why we give for what we're doing. So yeah, it's been exciting. It's been an exciting business.
Well, as soon as you say the word coffee, that excites me. So, and reminds me I need another coffee, but I digress. But I think it's fantastic. I think those connections have obviously, really have been an asset for you in terms of, being present in the community and connecting to people in the community. And I think you're so right. Like, we need to stop making this sacred secular divide and just let God use us wherever we are. And God can use us wherever we are if we make ourselves available. And so you walk through some pretty amazing opportunities in the community of Sioux Lookout. That's fantastic. Now, I'm gonna just pivot, to use a pandemic word, a little bit here, because it's related to the pandemic. But as you and I have been connecting over the months, the recent months, you had an interesting health journey as you contracted COVID, and then a prolonged period of recovery. And would you like to tell us a little bit about that, and also what God has been teaching you through that experience of not being well and now, recovering?
Yeah. I mean, of course, COVID is, the whole pandemic has affected us in many different ways, and affected the church in different places. And we were very careful taking the precautions as laid out by the government and all that kind of thing. But back in April, my wife's brother got sick with COVID, and he lives in the States. And then he passed actually from complications of that. So we took a quick trip, just real fast trip to the States and back. And of course, took all the precautions, all the testing, everything we had to do to go back and forth across the border, because we're dual citizens. So we come and go, and it was okay. But somewhere in that time frame, I contacted COVID. I still don't know where or who. That really doesn't matter. But I did get progressively sick, and finally ended up in the hospital. And finally got sick enough that they would admit me, and then was medevac, because we have a great hospital in Sioux Lookout, but it's a small community, so we don't have the ICU and all the things that the larger cities do. So I was medevac to Thunder Bay into their COVID unit and spent 10 days there. I was very sick. I was weak. I couldn't eat. I had no taste, of course, no smell. So I lost a lot of weight. And it was a pretty dark time. Like, just having come from my brother-in-law's funeral, there's you can't help but have some pretty scary thoughts about where you're at and what's happening with the virus. And it's so unknown how it affects different people. And it affected my lungs. That's where it hit me the hardest. And my wife had it as well, but she was ill for about 3 days, had a fever, and then she was done. But for me, it really hit me. And I'm a healthy guy. Like, I live a pretty healthy lifestyle. I walk on my treadmill every day, and I do those things to take care of my health. And I thought I did. And yet it really hit me pretty hard. But it was during that time in the hospital where I couldn't really read. I couldn't focus. I get tired very easily. So I listened to a lot of music. I read emails and texts that people were sending me. I couldn't respond because I would get too tired. I could send a text to my wife and then I was done, because I couldn't focus. It was too difficult to, I don't know. It's hard to explain how that all worked, but I was not able to. But it was through all of that I listened to music. That was a thing that, you can listen, and that doesn't take a lot of effort, but it really, at night, I would have my Spotify, my playlists I would play, and that's how I went to sleep. And that played all night. It was always going. And that's really how I got through that, and knowing, and there were so many people praying, and appreciated Impactus's impact on prayer for me during that time. And it was just, that was really, I could just sense, I told people I could sense something in that room. Like, I could feel there was a presence there. There was it was care. There was, everyone that came in and out of the room, of course, was all masked, and they were like, I was sick. I was a sick person. So they had to be very careful, and I appreciate that, but they really took good care of me there. Just amazing care. Yeah. But during that time, it was music that really carried me through. There's one song especially that I just kept coming back to. It's entitled Jesus Over Everything. I think it was done by the Belonging Company. And it just talks about how it doesn't matter what's going on in our lives. Jesus has it. Like, he's over everything. And it doesn't matter if it's sickness, it's death, it's pain, it's anxiety, it's fear. It doesn't matter what it is. He is over everything. And I kept claiming that promise just daily. And it was really that whole, and so there was just a new appreciation for life. And it was a brush with death. I don't know how close it was, but it really was. When they start talking about, the recovery dates of being on a vent, or recovery, like the mortality rates of people on a vent. And when they start talking about that, you have to think, oh, is this a possibility for me? And really, I had to be serious about those thoughts, and I had a serious conversation with my wife about it, my kids. Like I said, I'm very sick, but let's keep praying. I believe God has a plan. And that's the thing that I think, one of the things I took away from that experience was God said, no, we're not done, Nate. And you have more work to do. And there's more things I want you to be involved in. And so that's one of the things I've taken away from that experience and that sickness. The other thing is just to be reminded again of how Jesus really is over everything. Like I still go back and listen to that song sometimes 3-4 times a day, just to remind myself, yep, that's it. That was his promise then. It's my promise for today. And it's a promise that will get me through whatever situation I find myself in. And so during that time, also just a great team at the church that just took over everything. They said, Nate, don't worry about it. Don't expend any energy thinking about anything. We've got it. And they did. Like, they just took care of everything, the preaching, the teaching, whatever it was happening. I didn't have to worry about a thing. And so that was another blessing, just the church community and how they came together. And people I had no idea knew I was sick would send me texts, and say, we're praying for you. And even non-believers who said, we're thinking about you. Like, that was a blessing too, to know that, that it was not just the church community, but it was my business associates in town who, when they found out, were also involved in that whole caring for me during that time of my sickness. So that was in May. So now we're in the fall, and it's, I still have some lingering effects of it. Like, I still get tired. I'm ready at the end of the day to sit on my recliner and kind of rest. And it wasn't uncommon for me, 2 months later to, even in the middle of the day, sit down and have a nap before I could, finish the day. But I'm stronger than that. I'd say I'm 95%. Maybe I'm pretty good with how I can go through my day. I don't think about it too much, except when I'm working something, really physical, carrying things or doing those kind of things, run up and down stairs. I find a little bit of I have to stop and catch my breath. But I'm very thankful, just blessed to be where I am today, and how that I recovered from COVID. Yeah.
Well, we're so thankful that you are feeling so much better. And I do know there was quite substantial prayer that was brought to the throne room on your behalf from many people. And it's a good reminder, God still answers prayer.
Absolutely.
And as you shared, Jesus is over everything. And that's not just the good times of our lives. It's sometimes in the darkest times of our lives.
Yeah.
And we can trust him. And we're really thankful that he's not done with you yet, and there's still some work to be done. And that's what I'd like to kind of focus on, I think, for the last few minutes of this conversation. But I know one of the things that you've been very involved in is ministry to men. You've participated in some of the past Promise Keepers Canada conferences and things like that. But tell us a little bit about how ministry to men has been a part of the ministry at Sioux Lookout, and the value you've placed in that, and what that's meant for you.
Promise Keepers Canada has been a part of my experience for many years. I don't know when I went back actually after one of our conversations, Dean, and was trying to find out when that first conference, and I couldn't find it. Like, I thought I kept pretty good records, but I don't know. It was Brandon, Manitoba. And I'm sure that your record would show when that was, but that was early 90s, I think, was my first experience and exposure to Promise Keepers Canada. And of course, I went, and I'd heard about Promise Keepers. I knew about it, and yet had not been, I don't think I'd ever gone to a conference before. And some of the guys said, let's go. And I said, I think it's a great idea. Let's do it. And so there was, I don't know, 8 or 10 of us probably that went that first time. But something happened at that first conference that really, I think, spoke to me, and several things. But how real the speakers were, like, they were not, while they were obviously victorious in their Christian walk, they weren't perfect. And I think, often we have this idea, to be a conference speaker, you're a perfect person. And yet, as they spoke about their trials and their things they dealt with on a daily basis, there was a reality that the realness of men being believers was really kind of came home, and really I identified with that. Like, it resonated with me. And that one, but also just the point of men need each other. And so we're not just these islands out by ourselves. We need other men to help us get through life. And that's a reality that we all live with. But it was at that first conference where one of the speakers, and I don't remember who it was, but to make that point, I had all of us pastors, and I was associate pastor at the time. So I stood as a pastor, and he was asking us questions, and he was using the story of Moses and Aaron at the battle, when the battle was happening down in the valley. They were on the mountain, and as Moses would raise his hands, the battle was going for the Israelites. And when he let his hands down, they were losing. And that's, that was quite a vivid picture of how we are as men when we try to do things on our own. Even for Joshua, looking up and seeing Moses' hands up, he had confidence that he was bringing that thing to God. When his arms went down, Joshua would see it, and they began to lose. And so as my arms were getting tired, I couldn't hold them up anymore. But they said, no, keep them up. You got it. You can't put your arms down. Keep them up. Keep them. And then he finally said, now the men that came with you, have them come and stand beside you and hold your arms up. And that illustration just illustrates so well, I think, what men's ministry is all about. It's about coming alongside and walking with and holding people up when they want to fall down and when they want to quit. And just as a side note, just Sunday at church, a young man who I've ministered and mentored had a really struggle the last 3 weeks, and he just said, I need you to pray for me. I need help. And I said, and I was up front, of course, but I said, all right, a couple guys get over there and just lay your hands on and pray for him. Like, we have to hold his arms up. We have to keep him going and help him understand that we're with him during this time of struggle. And so that beginning, that picture, that illustration really kind of is what I keep coming back to that so many times as I minister with men, to men, and I'm that to other people, and they are that to me. Like, I have men who lift up my arms and I'm tired. I need them. I can't do this on my own. And I don't ever want to come to that place where I don't need people. And I think as men, and then to portray that to other men, I show my weaknesses. I show my vulnerable. I need to do that to men just to help them understand and see, hey, I'm not the perfect guy. I don't have it all together. I'm still learning. I'm 60 years old, but I'm still learning, and I need you. And that's kind of the way I see men's ministry, is that walking alongside. And it's a simple thing of going to the dump with someone. How spiritual is that? Well, it's not spiritual, but it's I'm with you. And it's showing that I care about your daily life and about how you're dealing with life. And we can have a conversation on that ride to and from. And so those are the opportunities I like to take as I think of ministry with men. I mean, there's lots of things going on, but that's in essence, I think, how I view it and how I kind of approach it.
Mm-hmm. What a powerful picture of what ministry to men is all about, that we hold each other's arms up and we're with each other. I think you captured that so powerfully. And you've experienced it in your dark times, experiencing COVID, that there were brothers who were standing with you, and you've had an opportunity to reciprocate that for guys. And I think it's just an incredible picture of what God's called us to do in an age where so many men are disconnected from each other and disconnected from the church. What a wonderful opportunity for guys to step into that space and say, no, you're not going to do life alone. We're going to be with you. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of I lead into my last question, but what would you say to the guy who's listening to this today and feels a bit of a calling or a challenge to go and do something in their local church or in their community? What would you say to them to encourage them to step out, as you've done on many occasions, just to uphold some other guy's arms and stand with them?
Well, I'd say that no activity is insignificant, and so and and like I've had experience many times, it doesn't often start with a spiritual conversation. It starts with watching a Grey Cup game, or watching hockey together, or going to an event in your town together, or a business dealing that you have an opportunity. Someone says, well, you're different than the rest of the guys. What are you all about? And I think that's, to step out and to be willing to, you have to get over some fear. I'm not going to, it is, to get over that fear of what is someone going to say, or what are they going to think about me if I say, hey, Jesus can do this, or God does this for me, and yet that's really where it starts. And I think for guys to understand that there's no secular and sacred in our lives. Well, there is, but there really isn't. And I think if we can see that whatever we do is sacred to God, it doesn't matter what it is. And so, as insignificant as it may feel to us, it's not insignificant to God or to that man who is in need for that particular day or the particular event that's happening in their lives. And so to walk alongside and to, I often use that, illustration with Jesus, like Matthew 11, when he's talking about my yoke is easy, my burden is light. We as men have a lot of burdens we carry sometimes, we do. And for someone to come alongside and say, hey, let me get in that yoke with you. Let me walk with you. I may not have all the answers, but I can listen. And that's the important part of men's ministry, is to be able to listen and not to have all the answers. I learned that a number of years ago. I had a man sitting at my kitchen table, and I thought I had all the answers, Dean. I thought I did. And I was giving them to him, and I was pretty young in ministry. And he looked at me straight in the eye and says, Nate, you are so arrogant. You think you have all the answers. And then he walked out. And I had and then probably the next 2 weeks had some of the deepest soul searching times I had in my entire life. When I just, I brought that to God and says, God, is that how I come across? Do I come across with all the answers? Really? Is that how people perceive what I say and do? And I kind of heard him say, yeah, Nate, you gotta walk alongside people. Don't just stand in front of them and talk to them. And that was a real turning point in how I approached men in ministry, to listen and to keep my mouth shut and to listen, and then to ask questions, then to give advice if they ask for it, instead of just coming across with, hey, this is how you should do it. Maybe it is that way, but it works for me. It may not work for you. And so that's, I think, the beauty of how God leads us through relationships and with people, is to identify and to find out what that way is. Well, how does God want to work in this life, in this situation? And God will reveal that to us. He will. He always does. And then those are the kind of times I think are real faith builders for me. Like, just, you walk with people and then you see a breakthrough, and it's like, okay, thanks God, I needed that encouragement for the day. And now we'll go on to the next one. And so it can start however small, but it will lead into different things for different men in different ways. But don't be afraid, because God is promising to be with us no matter what we're doing. And he is over everything, right? So he will have our backs if we make a mistake, and we have to be willing to say, okay, I was wrong. Because go back to that guy who told me I was arrogant. I went back to him. I said, I am so sorry. Like, not at all how I wanted to come across to you as a person. I am sorry. Will you forgive me? Let's start over. And then we did. And then there was a lot of different ways that that's an entire different story. But God does honor when we go back and make those things right, and then get back onto the right foot, so to speak, to get into relationship with men.
Oh, there's so much good advice in there for those that may feel like, can I start something? Am I the right guy? Do I have it all together? Probably not, but that's okay, because God is over it all. And we don't have to have all the answers. We just need to point people to the answer and let him take care of the rest. And I'm so grateful to hear how God has taken a boy from a dairy farm in Indiana and he's using them in Sioux Lookout to make such a difference. And he's brought you through such a, a difficult experience, even in recent months, but you're still focused on what he's called you to do. And Nate, I know you're making a difference, and I know you will continue to do so. And so thank you for sharing your story today. Thank you for sharing your wisdom around ministry. And if you're listening to this podcast today, I pray you'll take it to heart and just ask yourself, what does God want me to do with the things that are in my hands? And how can I use that to encourage another guy or to start a men's ministry or to just be a part of my community? And I can guarantee you there are opportunities all around us all the time. And we just need to step into those spaces and let God use us for his glory. And so thank you, Nate, for taking time with us today. It's been an incredible honor and a delight to be with you.
Well, I've appreciated this time too. It's been great just to answer some questions, but also just to have a conversation about how God's working. And I'm amazed, as God continues to play this journey out, and excited about what he has for me, for sure.
Well, let's stay in touch, because I know there are many more stories to be told. And so thank you again. And we'll look forward to hearing more stories at a Sioux Lookout.
Thanks for listening to the Impactus podcast. To learn more about living a life of purpose and godly impact, check out impactus.org.